let's bring on our guest, head football coach from SMU, Coach Rhett Lashlee. Coach, welcome to the show.
Man, glad to be here. Been waiting to be on this show for a long time.
I know we've been back and forth. You're a hard guy to get, man. I mean, you're just everybody's wanting a piece of you all the time.
I mean, I just know I came on the moment I was asked. That's all I know.
Yes, sir.
Well, good deal. Well, let's get into it because the audience most of our audience are going to know who you are, and researching you was really, I forgot what a great football player you were at Shiloh.
There's a lot of people that have forgot. Don't worry.
I have, and I'm sitting there doing some research and talk about this a little bit. Growing up here in Arkansas and then going to school at Shiloh, and I'm gonna throw some stats out for some people that don't know. You won 3 state championships. You threw for 171 touchdowns, number 4 in the nation. You threw for 672 yards in one game, and you were part of that Gus Malzahn. We had Gus on earlier, starting that no huddle part, before everybody else was doing it. Talk to us about how that maybe molded you as a coach at that time, and just as a high school player going through that. And, everybody else was huddling and doing those things. Y'all were fast paced, throwing the ball. Talk to me a little bit about how that developed you a little bit as a coach.
It was everything for just my foundation of coaching and what I know of football. I mean, my dad, Phil Phillips, they've moved up to Pinnacle now, but, grew up in Springdale, played at Springdale, was on the Springdale school board, and finally got off when I decided to stay at Shiloh in high school. But so he was a coach at Siloam and Huntsville. He coached Tommy Tice at Huntsville. So there was some background there, but I was a 7th grader when Jimmy Dykes hired Gus to come to Shiloh and be the head football coach. And we never made it past the first round. I don't think. Dennis DeBusk had been the coach at Shiloh, maybe made it to the second round. I don't need Dennis mad at me. And, Gus comes to Shiloh at the same time he hires Chris Wood to be our junior high coach. And Bray knows this a lot about Chris and to be the offensive coordinator for the high school and coach receivers. So, in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, I had Chris Wood and John Elder, who's I think at Prairie Grove still, was our 7th grade coach. And those guys coached me in junior high and then obviously playing for Gus and Chris both in high school. But we were no huddling with Chris as an 8th grade team. We were no huddling, and it was so fun. And, just even my 9th grade year, we had a good team. And I just remember the freedom as a 9th grade quarterback Chris would give me. Then at Shiloh, sophomore and junior year with Gus, and then he left and went to Springdale, and Chris came back as the head coach my senior year. And, my foundation of coaching goes to those guys mostly. And then Kevin Johnson, was our DC most of that time. And so all those guys who had such an impact on my life were a big part of Springdale football at Shiloh and Springdale and Harbor in some capacity for a long time. And they empowered me as a player to think the game, to learn the game. Even my senior year, Chris was calling plays out of empty and just pointing at me and letting me make the call. Just stuff that made me want to be a coach. And obviously I learned so much from those guys. It still helps me to this day.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, you go on to the University of Arkansas there for a little while. And then, Gus shows
Your
up.
research on me at Arkansas was real quick, right?
It was quick.
There wasn't a lot of stats. I think I was 0 for 2. Got in, handed the ball off a little bit against Mississippi State one time,
Well, it is what it is. And anyway, so Gus goes to the University of Arkansas, Houston Nutt as offense coordinator. You go there as a GA.
Yeah.
And the Springdale kids come in and all that, and you're there. You're kind of, statistically a great season. Here
we won 10 games and played Florida in the SEC championship game with Tim Tebow as a freshman and Chris Lee.
Yeah, went on to win a national championship.
They did.
And so you're there, and so Gus after that year goes to Tulsa
Mm-hmm.
as offense coordinator. And here's the part, and this is where really I got to know you a little bit. You get out of coaching and work for VAP magazine doing high school sports. What was your mindset? You're going to be a coach, and all of a sudden you're walking around talking to guys like me about high school players. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that's really interesting, because a lot of guys start off, get out, that kind of deal. Where were you at, and think back to that time period?
I didn't have the traditional path, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I was set up to have a great path. I got to GA in '06, like you said. I got to have a front row seat for Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, and the Wildcat that year. And what a year that was. I could write a book on that year. But and then yeah, Gus is going to Tulsa for a lot of reasons we probably don't have to get into, other than he's going to run his offense with Todd Graham. And I drive over the day Gus has his press conference, and he's like, "Hey, you're going to come. You're going to be the offensive GA, and you're going to actually coach the running backs." I'm like, "Hold on, I'm a GA and I'm coaching a position. Yes, this is a no-brainer." And I go over there, and without taking too long, I'll just say I was there for one day. He did his press conference. We watched some recruiting film, went to lunch with the head coach, Todd Graham, and driving back, there was just something in my gut that said, not no, but no way. You're not doing this. And it's happened 2 or 3 times in my life where logic tells you this, what you think you want to do and even should do, but then you're just like, no. And I just trusted my gut. I told Gus that night, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this, which, as you can imagine, Gus, what? No, there's no way, And then for about 48 hours, he asked me to think about it, and I did. And I mean, I labored, and I called every person in my life that I know and respect and bounced it off of them, because I knew it made no sense. It was probably ending any chance of a career in college football. And it was like right there for me that anybody would want. And I just couldn't do it. So I didn't do it. And I was engaged. I got married about 3 months later. But as soon as I didn't do it, about a week or two passed, I'm like, wait a minute, I got to get a job now. And so I got with High School Sports Magazine, became Vipe. My brother-in-law was friends with Kevin Hearn out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, who they had started it. He owned it. And he's like, well, yeah, let's start one in Arkansas. And I was in high school recently and knew the state, and I seemed like the perfect choice. I needed a job, so I did that. That's how I started talking to you. And the funny part of the story that really nobody knows is I guess some people know. So about a month, maybe 2 to 3 weeks later, Gus calls me up and goes, well, hey, all right, since you won't come be my GA, I need you to meet me up at Shiloh. I need you to meet this new guy that's going to come be my GA, and I need you to train him and tell him all the things he needs to know about me and our offense. And I'm like, all right, cool, I can do that. So I show up to Shiloh, and at this point, I think Chris was already gone to Harbor, and Josh Floyd's at Shiloh. So he gives us a meeting room. I walk in, there's a guy named Mike Norvell sitting in the seat. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, Mike, wow. Yeah, I'm Rhett. Hey, let me tell you all about Gus. And that's how Mike and I meet. Yeah. Well, as we know, that's Mike's wild. Doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And so I did that for just under 2 years, that magazine deal. It was a marketing, it was whatever. And it was good. It was paid the bills, but it didn't I knew 6 months in, man, I got to coach.
Yeah.
And, Gus did call me back about 6 months later after spring ball, and we were good. And fortunately for me, about 2 years later, he got a chance to go to Auburn. He said, you want to go to Auburn? And I said, yes, I think before he got it out of his mouth. And I was given a second opportunity. And I'll say this, I wouldn't change it for the world. It was a great 2 years that helped me and my wife create a foundation for our marriage and all this, because I don't know how she would have handled Todd Graham environment right out of the gates. But I was fortunate.
Well, you mentioned it. You go on to Auburn. You're there with Gus, and then he gets the ASU job, Arkansas State. Bam, you're the offense coordinator head to Arkansas State. Coming back home, you're from the northwest part of the state. Going over there, I know you were there just a short period of time. Y'all had a lot of success there. Talk to us a little about your time at Arkansas State.
That was weird being from Arkansas and growing up and being a Razorback and going to Arkansas, but it was also cool because, again, it was in the state. At the time, the governor of the state was an Arkansas State guy, and Gus's name was as big as any in the state. So we had stuff to recruit to, and Hugh had just been winning. We inherited a great quarterback in Ryan Applin, and it was my second year as an OC now, my first time as a D1 coordinator, and a chance to do it in my home state. That was really cool.
Well, great deal. You end up going to take off and go to Auburn, and there's a little, Sanford's there a little bit here or there. Yep. We won't get into that, but you go to Auburn, offensive coordinator, boom, you're playing for the national championship, right there. You're at the biggest stage and that part of it. You were there a long time at Auburn for really a college football coach. Talk to us about your time at Auburn. Some of the guys, Tim Horton's there, Eli and JB and those guys. Talk to us your time at Auburn. The Kick Six. You can just name them all. Just a lot of crazy. Yeah. The Georgia game. Good gracious alive.
Yeah, to your point, 4 years at one place in college football is a long time. That's almost
Yeah.
a couple decades, right? I've been blessed to coach with awesome people, awesome coaches. To your point, at Auburn, I was there for 2 years. The first time with Gus, we had Cam Newton. That was pretty cool. Won a national title and came back from down 24-0 in the Iron Bowl. But then to go back then in 2013 with JB Grimes as our line coach, Tim Horton comes as our running backs coach. Eli and I had been there the first time together, and yeah, the first year, I mean, as OC, we play Georgia. We catch this Hail Mary catch to win the game. 2 weeks later, I'm standing on the sidelines as the kick six, as Chris Davis runs right by me, and what is the Stanford Cal game of my generation.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, we're playing in another national championship game 2 times in 4 years, and we had 4 great years at Auburn the second time, and all 4 of my kids were born in Auburn. My boys were born in 2010. My girls were born in 2016. And I got to, a lot of my story, I spent a ton of time with Gus, as a
Yeah.
player. He gave me my opportunities both at Arkansas and Auburn when he didn't have to. Then he hired me again from Sanford at Arkansas State and took me to Auburn. And so, there's a lot of really good coaches out there. Probably could coach circles around me, but I was given the opportunities and really thankful for that and our time there.
Well, and then you take off and you go to UConn, and my thought process there is, hey, Gus is there as the offensive guy. You're the offensive coordinator. Get a chance to go out on your own. You go up there, you and JB do for a little while, and then you go to SMU where you're at now as the offensive coordinator. What attracted you? Obviously, the weather a little bit at UConn, but attract you. SMU seems like
Yeah.
just a gold mine. Everybody's talked about it. They think about the Eric Dickerson days and Craig James. A lot of people don't even know who they are, but you go back there as offense coordinator, make a great impression. Boom, go over to Miami with Manny over with the U, and then boom, you're back at SMU as a head football coach. Talk to me about that process, going out on your own a little bit, and doing your own thing and taking a chance on yourself when a lot of people are just comfortable sticking with their guy and all that deal.
Yeah, that's a great way to lead into the question. So after the 2015 season at Auburn, I had an opportunity to go talk with Dave Dorn at the time at NC State, and I don't know this, but I was at least told like, hey, if you want to go be the OC there, that's why you're going to meet with him. And I was planning on doing it. It was just time. You get to a point in anything in your development, like Gus did so much for me, but you kind of got to go off on your own and make your own mistakes and do those kind of things. Bet on yourself is what you're saying. But I was comfortable in Auburn. And I remember telling Gus on like a Saturday or Sunday night, hey, I'm going to go meet with Dave tomorrow at the convention. He's like, oh, okay. And then calls me later that night, hey, I don't want you to go. Well, I end up calling Dave saying, hey, I don't want to waste your time or mine. Like, we're not even going to meet. Talking about our buddies, guess who ends up, and he might have gotten
Eli.
it anyways, guess who ends up being the OC at NC State? Eli Drinkwitz. And so,
Yeah.
and it worked out really good for him. But I stayed, and it was a great year. My girls were born that next year, but then the next year there weren't the same options, and it was still time. So that's how I ended up at UConn. And a guy named Dave Benedict had become the AD there. He'd have been the number 2 AD at Auburn, and I get to go work for Randy Edsel. And that was actually probably the worst year from a results standpoint in my career. We went 3-9, but it was the best year in my career long term for my coaching career. We went 3-9. We inherited at the time there was 100 and I believe 29 teams in Division I college football. UConn had been 129 the year before in offense. So hey, the bar was nice and low, and went in there and we went from 129 to 49th in the country in total offense. We won 3 games. We were coaching our tail off. Johnny Brewer was with me.
Yeah.
Everybody knows he just got the OC job at Duke, and he's an Arkansas guy. And yeah, it was like when the opportunity to come to Texas, to come to Dallas, growing up in Arkansas, Texas high school football is kind of mythical and everything's bigger in Texas. And chance to coach with Sonny at SMU, I knew it was going to be hard to continue to recruit players at UConn. And I wasn't a big fan of the 18-inch snows. So I could get south, got south. And the second year, we were able to have a great career, but back to a great season. We won 10 games, and that got me the Miami job. And then at Miami, we do well. And I'm fortunate when Sonny left to get the head job here. But to your point, at some point, I had to take that leap, bet on yourself. It was scary. You don't know how it's going to go. And, for a year or two, you kind of do what you know. based on what you did with Gus. And then after a while, you kind of develop your own personality and you trust the coaches around you and evolve like we all do as coaches. But had I not done that, who knows? And yeah, it maybe took my path a little longer to get to being a head coach. That's fine. I wouldn't trade one experience I had for anything. And I actually think every one of them helped me be ready when I did get the opportunity.
Well, and you've done that and had a lot of success at SMU. I mean, you've been there. I love watching your games, just score and I mean, just the way your kids play hard. Let me ask you this: you're going to the Dallas Metroplex, which is probably overly recruited more than any place in the United States.
It's number one every year, about the most D1 kids sign. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you, at SMU, they've kind of had that program's been up and down, the highs and lows and all that part, and you've kind of got in there and kept it steady. How do you keep those guys around there? Do you go outside and look in other states? Or, I mean, because most of you, I know when, TCU, they never really left that area when they, were kind of rolling there. And is that y'all's philosophy, or are you just looking for everybody? I know portal's a whole different animal. And
yeah.
We'll get into that later on, but how do you recruit that area and keep people out of there and keep your own?
Well, we don't keep people out of here, but yeah. I do appreciate you called it the Dallas Metroplex, because that's what I call it. I was a marketing major. It's not the DFW Metroplex. It's the Dallas Metroplex.
That's right.
It's just the way it is. And so there's some big suburbs around here, but it's the Dallas Metroplex. And so to your point, it's tough. TCU got into a quote power league about a decade or 12 years earlier. Gary Patterson did just an incredible job, and they got that opportunity. And there's so much history and tradition and pride here at SMU, but there has been a long gap. And so our philosophy in recruiting is a little bit of an inside out approach. It's almost, if you remember Howard Schnellenberger goes to Miami in 1983. They were about to shut the program down, and they hired Howard Schnellenberger's like, hey, this is the last guy. Let's see what happens. And he gets this idea of the tri-counties, Palm Beach County, Doward, and Braid, and he called it the state of Miami. And that was their philosophy. So what we've done here is the 11 counties that make up the Dallas Metroplex, from, as far north as you can go, South Dallas, East Dallas, all the way out to Fort Worth, and just make a big circle. We call that the state of Dallas. And that's our recruiting philosophy. And so that's our home state. The rest of Texas happens to be our surrounding area. That's like our secondary, but it's still our home state, if you will. But in recruiting, that's been our philosophy of Dallas Metroplex, state of Texas. And then, we're not going to be inefficient or spin our wheels outside of that. Portal's a different deal. Now that we're in the ACC, you got places like Atlanta and South Florida that you may drop in and we'll get a few players out of. Ironically enough, the second highest population of students on SMU's campus outside of the state of Texas is Southern California.
Wow.
And so you got to go to Southern Cal every now and then and get a few players. But the bulk of our guys should come from the state of Texas. Now, because the Metroplex is so heavily recruited, that's why the conference move was such a big deal for us. Because so many kids are like, I want to stay home and play for SMU and stay in Dallas. It's a great school. It's in Dallas. You've now been winning for the last 5 or 6 years. There's, I don't want to go. We're the only school within 30 miles of downtown Dallas, the only D1 school. But I want to play on the biggest stage. And we didn't have that. And now, our first conference game is Florida State this year at home. So I think the stage has changed for those guys. And that's why I think you see in 2025, we have a top 20 recruiting class right now in the next class, because the caliber of kids that maybe we can now keep home the first time instead of the portal time is changing.
Wow. And it's just grown, and that program is really grown. Well, we talked about ups and downs and everything. Bray, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach. So my question for you, you look at your career, and you've had so much success as a play caller, around some great head coaches, different programs. When you make that transition to head coach, what exactly are you looking for as an offensive guy in your offensive coordinator? What are some traits that you want to see there, and what are your expectations of him?
Great question. I don't know. I appreciate the kind words. I've learned from 2 great ones. Chris Wood and Gus Malzahn were really good, and they're really aggressive, and that's who I learned from. But, fortunately for me, I watched Gus and Chris's relationship, right? And then I had the same relationship with Gus for a long time where he was the head coach, but he was also calling plays a good majority of that time that we were together, and I was his OC. And so I kind of knew what that role needed to do for a head coach in that scenario. That helped. So I look for a couple things. I look for, first of all, a guy I know I can trust. I think that's with all coaches, but in that role, because it's tough. I mean, look, I had to do it for 4 years at Auburn, and for about 2.5 or 3 of those, I wasn't calling the plays. And so it's really hard to go into the media after an Iron Bowl and you went for a play on 4th and 2 that you didn't call and it didn't work. And all they want to know is, why did you do that? Why didn't that work? And you can't say, well, the head coach called it. You know what I mean? You have to be like the White House press secretary and be like, hey, this is what we were thinking. This is why we did it. And you got to take that, but that's your role for the head coach. He's my head coach. I have to honor him. That's my role. And so you got to find somebody you really trust that can do that role, because it's a hard role. Now, it has its perks. You're a coordinator. You get paid well. It may help you get an opportunity, especially if you're successful under a guy who's really good at it like Gus was. But it's still hard, right? And so you got to know someone you can trust that'll do that. Someone that hopefully compliments you. Like, believe it or not, personality-wise, Gus and I are way different, and it worked. And so trying to find someone that I can trust, get along with, and can spend a lot of time with, but like maybe I'm a big picture guy. I understand how important the details are. You can't win without it. So I do get in there, but I don't love it. So maybe I hire a guy who loves the details and the minutia. And so now we work well together and balance each other. And then someone that hopefully has dreams of doing what Gus did or Eli did, or I've been able to do, or Norvell, and hopefully give them that opportunity to do that someday.
Sure. And you look across on the defensive side of the ball. I guess, how involved in your defense are you? Is that something you kind of hand the keys over to that D coordinator, or are you really in there with him in game plan situations?
Yeah, I think it's probably different if you're calling plays or not. I don't know. I've only done it 2 years, and I called plays both years, so I don't really have Coach Williams probably has a better benefit of knowing what that's like both ways than I do. But calling plays on offense, if you're going to be the head coach and you're going to be a play caller, I don't know how you can do a good job it's hard to do a good job at both. You got to have really good people on your offensive staff, on your support staff, especially in season, but definitely can't go over there and run the defense. So,
sure.
Scott Simons does a great job for us. You hire someone that you trust, you believe. He's basically like the head coach of the defense. Now, we talk a lot as coaches, and he'll get my opinions on things and I'll get his opinions. And look, as the head coach, you better know what's going on. So I know what we do. I know the scheme. I go against it in spring ball and fall camp, and I know it, and I see where there's issues, and maybe we can say, hey, like, are we really going to do that with our safety, and those kind of deals. But I do think you have to trust him and let him go do it, because
sure.
You just got to find someone who wants that pressure and responsibility. And because I got to be the head coach, I got to call the plays, and I got to be available to help on defense, but I don't go over there and tell them when to blitz and what to do. I trust those guys and let them do it, because I also know it's going to be really hard if I'm in their ear all the time. That's going to make their job harder.
Sure.
No doubt. All right, Mouth.
All right, Rhett. Pleasure to meet you. I followed your career for many, many years. And I must say, when I graduated from Rice University, my dad coached there with Fred Goldsmith, 89,
Wow.
1991. And our first game in 1989 was against SMU, coming off the death penalty. And how your facilities have changed for the better from the dressing room in the OMB basketball gym, and we were just basically underneath a parking lot, and like a 15,000. I don't even know how many people that OMB Stadium held at the time. But
well, you caught SMU at a good time.
Yeah. It was SMU's first game, and at that time, Rice had the longest losing streak in the country. So, it was two bad. It was two bad ball teams going at it. We had a pillow fight, and luckily Rice won. But I've just been following your career, especially this past y'all were just can't miss. Follow. I started following SMU with Coach Dykes. He's a Texas Tech guy, and his dad Spike was the coach at Texas Tech while we were at Rice. And Sonny and I are about the same age, but I knew a bunch of people that worked for him, and I followed you. And then I kept following you every year at SMU, and this year was just, I mean, it was can't miss Saturday. It was can't miss Saturday to watch you play. And Scott Reed had a player from El Dorado, Dalton Purdue, that I had watched from I think I saw Dalton play the first time in 10th grade. Scott said, because my dad had been athletic director at Forest City and hired Scott, and then at El Dorado and they went together. He said, your daddy would like this Dalton. He'd like this Dalton Purdue. And I said, no kidding. He was like 6'6", 235 in the 10th grade, and he could move and he was long. And I said, I think you got something there. I'm not sure, but I think you do. And my question now is, as a head coach, because it's changed so much, how do you navigate through the transfer portal and NIL? And it's hard to be a head coach now, especially in college. And you see, like, the coach at Boston College, he left to be the defensive coordinator at the Packers. Is that right? You know whom I'm speaking of. And it just seems like for a head coach or any college coach, you have no time off. How do you navigate that with a young family and things like that?
I don't know if we have enough time. We need a new podcast or whatever to answer that question appropriately. I'll say this, it's a lot. And here's the deal. It's hard as coaches because we all get into this because we're for the young men. Like, yes, we want to win and we love to compete. And probably a lot of us couldn't do anything else. I tried to do the magazine deal. We saw how that worked out. So, it's like Lewis Campbell once told me, man, I said, when I was young, I said, should I do this coaching deal? I said, I'm going to tell you what I told my son. And he goes, if you can do anything else in the world besides coach, do it. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, but if you can't, then coach. So I'm one of those. And so we do care about them, though. We don't, especially high school coaches, you're not in it for the fame and the money. And I think now there's a misconception that if, as a coach, especially a college coach, you don't come out and be pro all these things, that you're not for the young men. No, that's all we're for. And look, if they can capitalize and make some money, whether it's NIL revenue, great. If they can have some choice in certain situations to leave and transfer when things, maybe a head coach leaves and all, great. We're for them more than just about anybody on the planet. But if you speak out too much, you're considered not for them. Or if you talk about how hard your job is, then they're just going to drill you in the media and say, oh, it's so hard. Yeah. Nobody's saying it's a lot. It's a lot when you got to recruit your team every day so you can't coach them, right? It's a lot when you got to recruit high school kids and then transfer kids and all those things. But I don't think any coaches, even some coaches that have complained lately about how December's crazy. There's not coaches complaining about because they don't want to work. There's only 24 hours in a day. If you give us 30 hours, we can make it happen. But 24 hours isn't enough to do all the things at a high level. And at the end of the day, I'd argue we're not helping young men for the long term. So I think we've got to find a way to give them what they need and deserve, and at the same time, preserve the sport and what it taught all of us. Because I know this. I learned a lot at Shiloh. I learned a lot at the University of Arkansas. I got a master's from Auburn somehow. But I learned more from playing football for my high school and college coaches than I've learned from anybody. And so I know I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there to your question, but I want to make sure that we're still doing the best, not only for the short term, but the long term for the young men we get to coach. And I think we can do it. But you do have to juggle a lot. And here's what I tell you, to answer your question the best I can. I know what's most important to me. And my wife and kiddos are my two sets of twins. That's number one. And I make time for them. And if I'm any good at what I do, I'm going to have to work a lot, and they're going to have to be my hobby. My golf game's not very good anymore. I can still beat Gus. Y'all can make sure he knows that. But my golf game ain't what it used to be, and I don't hunt and fish, and I don't get to do a lot of other things outside of ball and my family right now. But if that's the priority when I do have time, if I'm any good at what I do, I can do it in an amount of time that still gives me time to be where I need to be for my kids and for my wife. Yeah, they make sacrifices, but that's going to be the priority for me. And I would argue if you do it the right way, the quality of time will outweigh the quantity of time any day. And so it's a great question. And we're trying to figure it out annually right now because the rules change, the landscape changes. So how we juggle it is what you're asking, changes. But here's the deal. You either survive and adapt or you don't make it. And so we're going to do everything within the rules to be as competitive as we can be, with all that you asked about.
Well, let me piggyback off this, and we've kind of your answer is about the same. Everybody we get on here, you know, there's obstacles and issues with the portal and NIL, and you gotta, you know, either get with it or you get left behind. That's kind of what everybody's been saying. What do you see the future? If you had a crystal ball of college football, do you think there's a salary cap? The thing just came out about Tennessee and all that deal. Do you see power, you know, 2 or 3 power conferences, maybe, or 4? And I mean, what's the word out there? I mean, it's not everybody knows, but I mean, what do you see?
Yeah.
What do you think the best answer is?
Well, I know what we're doing now is not sustainable. It's just not sustainable, not for the coaches. It's not sustainable as a business model. It's not sustainable for long-term student athletes and high school recruiting and kids in portals. Like it's not sustainable. There's no business model. We don't even know what we are. We have free agency in the middle of the season in December. No one else does that. Like we don't really have a full amateur model anymore. And we don't have a pro model. We're caught somewhere in the middle with an identity crisis. And so, something will happen. I don't know what. I think everybody's working hard at it to try to do what I said. Hey, let's do right by the young men and women that are competing at the same time. You know, still keep it. Hey, they're still going to school, guys. Like they still go to school. They're still here to get a degree. But you know, our game's never been more popular.
Yeah.
With all the stuff going on and I mean, it's heartbreaking that there's no Pac-12 anymore. I still don't know if I can really fathom that. And I get it. Things aren't regional anymore, but like all those things are happening. It's still never been more popular. So they're going to figure it out. College football's not going anywhere. And so what the rules will be and how they change, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people that care that are trying to find the right answer. It's going to be different. It's never going to be the way it was. So whether it's rev sharing, whether there's a collective bargaining or all those things, I don't know. But there has to be rules. You can't have a league or a sport without rules and guidelines and parameters. And right now we just don't have any. And at the end of the day, that's not in the best interest of the student athletes because it's just like my kids. They still crave and need discipline and structure, even if they have freedom. You know, structure and discipline equals freedom. And that's what we got to figure out. So I'm not going to really answer it because I don't know, but something's got to happen. Something's got to happen.
Yeah. And I think there will. I'll get you off here with this. We had Gus on a week or so ago, and he said that, you know, you're probably one of the best, maybe the best assistant coach he ever had. He said one thing about you, when the chaos is going crazy, you're at your best because you're the calmest guy around and you can see the big picture. Where do you think you learned that, or is that just kind of your nature, or talk to us a little bit about that?
Those are kind words. I'll give him credit for how he coached me because he coached me hard with a lot of chaos. So I had to figure out how to be calm in the chaos. I mean, I would be 9 out of 10 in practice and he would be yelling at me, "You're killing us. You stink." I'm like, "What? I'm 9 out of 10, you know, like what are we doing?" You know, he told me he gets mad at me when I tell this story because I love him to death. He told me he was going to kill me in a game one time because I threw a pick. And you know what? He probably should have. Like, I probably deserved it. So, no, look, I learned so much from working with Gus and playing for Gus. Just everything that is in my philosophy. I mean, stylistically, we're a little different with our offenses. We still both like to know huddle and all that, you know, and we got different personalities and how we call plays. And I throw it a little more and he runs it a little more and all, whatever. But like just the core philosophies that I learned on how to coach, the run game, the philosophies on how to be good at stuff and not do too much. And just, I could go on and on a whole nother podcast on the things I learned from him, that have helped me immensely. And then getting to coach alongside him for so long and just see, more's caught than taught. And I learned so much just from watching the guys like him and the Pat Sullivans and also in my life. I don't know. I think playing the quarterback position helped. And I know I only played it predominantly in high school, but I did play it for a guy who had really high expectations. And so I think that helped, because you think the game at quarterback. So you're used to 2-minute drills and you're used to scenarios. And so for whatever reason, I don't know why God has allowed me to be comfortable in the chaos. And, when things are the craziest or late in the game, I just am able to be in that moment, I guess. And then obviously every time I make a bad call in those moments, the whole world lets me know. So that's good too.
They always do, don't they?
Yeah, you gotta love it. Hey, someday
Sure,
you want to be
sure.
the dentist, who can just go and rip someone's tooth out or mess the filling up, and nobody knows and nobody cares, and nobody's coming in there and trying to tell him how he should have done it either. But that's the life we chose.
Exactly. Last question. Give us a great football story. Just might be high school, college. I put you on the spot here. I didn't tell you where I was going to ask you it before.
Yeah.
Just give us one. You off the top.
Ooh, a great football story. Okay. Well, I'm sure I could think of a better one than this, but I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
The first one I've already alluded to. So we're playing Charleston and Shane Story my junior year in the semifinals, and we're about to win and go to state. And we're up 2 scores in the fourth quarter. And I'd already thrown a pick in the game, and I really had. I mean, I throw another pick, and it was like a glance wheel. And I mean, it was bad. I lobbed the wheel up there. The safety was there all along. Like, it was stupid. And it got picked off. And we're up 2 scores midway through the fourth. So I'm running off the field, and I'm thinking, whatever. And like 2 coaches meet me halfway at the numbers and escort me one way. And I'm like, what's going on? And I look up, and 2 other coaches are pulling Gus the other way. As he's screaming, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. That's so stupid, And I'm like, yeah, but you really? And as a junior, I wasn't quite sure. And I know he's going to get mad at me. No, everybody, he wasn't going to kill me, maybe. But that was a good one. And he was right. Now, the best one is, the kick six. So we had just scored with 30, 40 seconds to go to tie it at 28-all. At that point, there had never been an Iron Bowl go to overtime. And I remember Gus on the headset. The place is going bonkers because it was at home. And he goes, hey, start thinking about overtime. And I'm like, oh, crap. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So I'm looking at the call sheet, and Alabama starts moving the ball up. And, of course, they have the deal where I think it was Yeldon runs out of bounds around just past midfield, and the clock runs out. The place goes nuts. And then, of course, Saban throws a fit, reviews it. They put 1 second on the clock. So they go out to kick a 57-yard field goal, not throw a Hail Mary, which I would thought they would have done because Alabama kickers weren't very good. And so I'm kind of half thinking about overtime, but I'm kind of half watching the game like a fan, like, holy cow, And so we send our defense out, and we put one of our safeties back deep, just some random safety under the goalpost. And Gus is like, hey, I'm going to ice him. Boom, timeout. Cool. And I look up, and I'm like, we had our safety back. Well, we had a guy at corner named Chris Davis who led the country that year in punt returns. Led the country. And so I'm like, Gus is talking with Scott Fountain, who was our special teams coordinator.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if we're going to put somebody back there, wouldn't we put the number 1 punt return in the country back there? And Gus goes, yeah. Hey, Scott, put Chris Davis back there. Put Chris Davis back. And Scott's like, okay, yeah, it's a good idea. And I hear Scott, and I swear I don't know what his recollection is and how he's told the story, and that's fine. But this is what happened. Scott tells the punt block or the kick block unit. He said, all right, here's the deal. They got a bunch of big guys up there. It's a 57-yard field goal. Drive it up the middle. Try to block it. If you hear thump, thump, somebody scoop it and score. If you only hear one thump, then once you hear it kicked, all you guys run and just make a wall on our sidelines on the numbers. I mean, he's just telling them. We hadn't practiced it. Chris, if you catch it, set it up and then hit our sidelines and see what happens. And that's it. Next thing you know, the game's over. And that's what happened. So that's how hard this coaching deal is.
It is.
That's unreal.
And stories like it are just amazing. People think, well, we had Tim on Horton before, and he goes, "We never practiced that." You know,
No.
it's just amazing. Players making plays, baby. You know, at the end of the day.
Hey, if you watch the replay, Tim's almost on the field.
He about gets run over. I was sitting there watching when it was going through, and I'm sitting there, and my wife goes, "What's going on?" I go, "They're fixing to win." And, you know, it was just, everybody's kind of shocked. And look up, and there's Tim. He's looking up the deal. He's about to get run over. We talked about it. He's on there. I said, "Tim, get out of the way. You're going to get a penalty. You're going to get killed, man."
Yeah.
Well, good stuff. Well, Coach, I appreciate you coming on, man. Big fan of yours. You did. And I want to say this, and I've had a lot of feedback. You were at the clinic a couple of weeks ago and spoke, and outstanding job. Outstanding. Had a big crowd there, and just more people being there. Can we get that guy back? Can we get him back? We, you know, got in there and talk ball, and I really appreciate you coming back and doing that and taking time out of your schedule. And thanks for being with us today, Coach.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Mouth, good to see you. Bray,
Thank you.
always been proud of you, man. Jeff, always respected you, appreciate everything. And Arkansas high school coaches impacted me in a large way. So it was great to get to be around everybody at that clinic. And now keeping up with this podcast is a lot of fun too.
Oh,
So,
it is, man.
Yes, sir.
It's getting hot. It's getting hot.
there we go.
Well, good. Thanks for going on, man. See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Coach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Boy, Coach gave us a lot of information there, guys. You know, following his career and where he's going. I mean, he's going to just done an outstanding job. You know, he answered your question a little bit about what he does with his offense, and what did you get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, him telling those stories there at the end about, you know, the kick six and playing for Coach Malzahn. You know, it's just it's cool to think these guys, you know, from Springdale have gone on to be in some really impactful coaches and been a part of some huge moments in college football.
No doubt. What did you get, Brent?
Well, it's just incredible in the short time of his career. He's coached with some of the best coaches in the country. Randy Edsel, coach at UConn, coach at Maryland. Sonny Dykes, coach at SMU, coach at TCU. Played in the national championship game last year. I mean, it's just incredible the people he's come across and how he's taken everything he's learned from all those people and meshed it into a really fine career at SMU as a head football coach, and expecting him only to do better now that he's going to the ACC.
Yep, that's going to be interesting. Well, Bray, let's get off here to talk to everybody how to find us. We're blowing up. X has been blowing up. So has YouTube.
Yeah, no, we're growing. We continue to grow. We're Coaches Pod on Twitter and YouTube. Coaches in the Mouth. You search that on anything, you're going to find us. Our store is attached to our YouTube channel, so go ahead and jump on there, get a hoodie, and all those things are going live and continuing to grow. We'll have more products as the weeks go on.
Well, that's awesome. You have a nice sweatshirt on.
Yeah, I did.
That's really nice.
Some quality stuff.
It is. Well, for Coach Jeff Williams, Bray Cook, and the Mouth Brent Bender, we'll see you next time.